There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Please be seated. The secretary will read the order.
Debate on vote number 6, International Relations and Cooperation Appropriation Bill.
The Honorable the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, you are invited to the podium.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and good afternoon to all honorable members. Chairperson, allow me to recognize our Deputy Ministers, Mashiko Dlamini and Deputy Minister Botas, the Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, Chairperson Mahuma Pelu, and honorable members of the Portfolio Committee, colleagues from the Executive joining us, honorable members and guests. Good afternoon and welcome to this debate on the 2022-23 work of DIRCO and the budget for the new 23-24 financial year. We are fortunate, Chairperson, to have been given an opportunity to have our debate on such an important day. 29 years ago, on May 10, 1994, South Africans participated in the inauguration of the very first democratically elected president of South Africa, President Nelson Mandela. From that day, South Africa took on the mantle of President Mandela in the practice of international relations, which is to seek peace, justice, and equality wherever we may have a chance to make a difference. Honorable members, the past financial year proved to be a tumultuous year for international relations. We had thought COVID-19 had put us through the most difficult time, but the conflict in Europe has introduced more difficulties for all of us who work in international relations. Despite the many complicated challenges, our department continued its focus on our core tasks. These are to strengthen bilateral relations, play an effective role in multilateral institutions, provide services to our citizens abroad, and support our government in achieving the objectives of inclusive growth, peace and development in South Africa, Africa, and the world. The past year has seen a significant expansion in the bilateral work of the minister, the deputy ministers, and our officials, as well as a very active international diary for President Ramaphosa. On the budget, Chairperson and honorable members, we're pleased to report on our budget in this debate. The department budget allocation for 23-24 has increased from 6.8 billion Rand in 22-23 to 6.9 billion Rand for this financial year. This is a modest increase of 1%. The increase is largely for compensation of employees, which has been increased by 5% from 3 billion Rand in the past financial year to 3.2 billion Rand in this financial year. The increase will allow our department to fill critical vacant positions. The goods and services budget has also been increased by 4% to 2.5 billion Rand in this financial year. This welcome support will enhance our ability to implement our key programs and improve the work of all our missions. Honorable members, you may recall that last year we undertook to increasingly focus on economic diplomacy in the department and our mission. Our missions have been playing a leading role in assisting our government in all spheres in their international cooperation efforts. A specific area of progress has been to provide government and the presidency economic diplomacy assistance for growing foreign direct investment into South Africa. We have made economic diplomacy a critical aspect of our mission work, and we are very pleased at the continuing interest many companies have shown in South Africa as an investment destination. I've held meetings with business people in the various countries I've had the opportunity to visit, and many want to know more about South Africa and plan to establish new interests in our country. The work all our teams have done has produced very positive results and will continue to do so. I wish to thank all our embassy teams from some really excellent work, particularly our heads of mission. The past financial year continued government success in increasing foreign direct investment into our country, particularly through the annual Presidential Investment Conference. We are pleased that our missions, working closely in partnership with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, have succeeded in achieving the goal of 1.4 trillion rands in investment commitments to South Africa. We will continue to support this work led by President Ramaphosa. Chairperson, I now turn to our geopolitical environment. Chairperson, our world has become increasingly fractured and complex. Relations in the globe are strained, worryingly divided, and diverted from the development goals we all committed to with the Sustainable Development Goals. The most powerful economies are in a fractious trade conflict that threatens all the smaller economies of the world. There is armed conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and there are insufficient voices calling for peace or working to create a stable, peaceful environment. The poor and marginalized are facing the greatest threat in that their plight is forgotten while the mighty fight. The result has been increased economic risk for the most vulnerable, low growth levels in much of the globe, and neglect of those in the greatest need. Food inflation and high energy prices have strained incomes and resulted in high debt costs and persistent uncertainty. This is not the world many hoped for when the Cold War ended. As DIRCO, we have consistently urged a return to peace, to multilateralism, and to partnerships for development. Our department has made great efforts to remain focused on our primary objectives. We have strengthened partnerships and promoted peace and security in our region, SADC, on the continent of Africa, and indeed globally. On peace and security, just last year, we concluded our term as chair of the SADC organ on peace, defense, and security. South Africa led the efforts as chair to activate and support the deployment of a mission in Mozambique and engaged with Eswatini to encourage efforts to establish national unity in that country. President Ramaphosa also concluded his assignment of the SADC facilitation process in Lesotho and tabled his final report to the SADC summit last August. Lesotho held successful elections last year and is actively implementing the reform agenda adopted by the National Reforms Authority. We remain concerned about the war between Russia and Ukraine and want to encourage all parties involved to find a route to peace. We are convinced that negotiations are imperative for ending this terrible strife and continue to urge attention to diplomacy. We as South Africa will be serving in the AU Peace and Security Council for the next 2 years, and we hope that intensified efforts will be given by Africa to finding peace in Sudan, Mali, Libya, Chad, and Burkina Faso. On South-South cooperation and BRICS, one of the ways, Chairperson, in which a context of global collaboration could be advanced is through establishing influential formations that would work with the United Nations to advance an inclusive, forward-looking international development agenda. It is possible for BRICS to play such a transformative role. South Africa is serving as chair of BRICS for 2023, and we hope that the BRICS leaders can assume a stronger role in bringing peace to Ukraine and Russia. We welcome the efforts of President Xi Jinping and those promised by President Lula da Silva of Brazil. BRICS has attracted great interest from a number of countries, and our Sherpas are engaged in conceptualizing how BRICS could respond to such interest. It's vital to ensure that what is eventually agreed strengthens multilateralism, the United Nations, and our non-aligned movement. We hope our leaders will provide definitive guidelines at the conclusion of the BRICS summit this year. The growing interest in BRICS indicates that many countries are searching for a multipolar forum that is modern, inclusive, and oriented toward the good of all. Our BRICS theme of this year is BRICS and Africa, partnership for mutually accelerated growth, sustainable development, and inclusive multilateralism. BRICS is our partnership of emerging economies and developing countries that wish to play a positive role in world affairs, ensuring benefit to the global South. We are encouraged by the growth and resilience of the new development bank of BRICS and welcome the new members of the bank. The bank has assisted members to secure funding, to address infrastructure needs, support the unlocking of regional value chains, and localization of productive capacity. Our partnership with BRICS has resulted in tangible benefits for our country in a wide range of sectors. Total trade with BRICS countries has increased from 487 billion Rand in 2017 to 702 billion Rand in 2021. We have received funding of over $5 billion from the new development bank for key infrastructure projects in renewable energy, water resources, and other sectors. Our priorities for BRICS this year, as chair, are to develop a partnership toward an equitable, just transition, to transform education and skills development for the future, to unlock opportunities through the African Continental Free Trade Area, to strengthen post-pandemic economic recovery, and to strengthen multilateralism. Our BRICS countries support a strong multilateral system and reform of the United Nations Security Council. Our target this year is to ensure increased strengthening of BRICS and, of course, the hosting of a successful summit by us, South Africa, in August this year. Chairperson and honorable members, we have remained focused on the vision of peace set out by former President Mandela throughout his lifetime. We have committed to playing a full role in resolving international challenges and to helping countries achieve peace and security. Working through the African Renaissance Fund, we will support reconstruction efforts in Cabo Delgado in Mozambique. We will use our 3 years in the UN Human Rights Council to promote peace and full enjoyment of human rights for all people. We'll also continue work to realize the bold anti-racism initiatives of the Durban Plan of Action that was adopted at the Anti-Racism Conference over 20 years ago. We will, as South Africa, continue to argue for reform of the Security Council and for a greater focus on the values and principles enshrined in the UN Charter. Our focus on BRICS will be implemented alongside continued work to retain and strengthen links with the whole African continent, with Europe, with the United States, with East Asia, as well as with the Middle East. All of these are important trading partners for South Africa, and they cannot be neglected. We are pleased that from this year, the non-aligned movement, our NAM, will be chaired by Uganda. We will work closely with our sister country to strengthen the non-aligned movement, and we wish to congratulate Azerbaijan for the leadership they have provided to NAM when serving as chair. We will also continue our participation in the G20 and consistently profile the interests of South Africa and Africa. We are pleased that the G20 has agreed with us and the AU that the AU must be a permanent presence at the G20. And we look forward to working closely with the AU to profile our development agenda. We believe more attention should be given to addressing post-COVID liquidity challenges on the continent, and call on the G20 to do more to assist. It is worrying that the conflict in Ukraine has diminished world attention from the challenges in Africa and has left the marginalized even more vulnerable to the dangers of terrorism, food insecurity, climate change, and instability. Developing countries need a G20 focused on issues of development. The G20 should actively encourage wealthy G7 member states to honor their financial commitments to supporting developing countries in mitigation and adaptation in response to climate change. They should also play a leading role in entrenching peace and security globally. Last year, our commitment to peaceful resolution of conflicts was visibly illustrated in our country's support for peace in Ethiopia. South Africa was honored to host the Pretoria Peace Talks, as they are now called in Ethiopia. We thank the people of Ethiopia for trusting us, and we thank the facilitators and international partners for the wonderful work that they did. President Obasanjo displayed incredible leadership, ably supported by President Uhuru Kenyatta and former Deputy President Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka, our own. South Africa will continue in support of peace efforts and the entrenchment of human rights in the globe. We are grateful to have been elected to the UN Human Rights Council and will be pursuing a human rights agenda there. That agenda will support our established and new global solidarity efforts. We'll continue our support for a two-state solution for Israel and Palestine. We know much has been done to make this improbable, but we must never give up. We must continue all efforts for peace and freedom for the people of Palestine and Israel and the people of Western Sahara, and continue our solidarity with the blockaded people of Cuba. We must also improve our solidarity with South Sudan, Mali, Libya, and Chad. We are still in the middle of the Nelson Mandela UN Decade of Peace, declared for the period 2019 to 2028. And as inheritors of the legacy of President Nelson Mandela, we all have a duty to be activists for peace on our continent and worldwide. Our focus on human rights must also be active in seeking full enjoyment of equality and justice for the women of Afghanistan. The South cannot be silent when girl children and women are denied rights that we regard as fundamental to our humanity. I wish, Chairperson and honorable members, to thank the people of South Africa for their generous solidarity for the people of Turkey and Syria when they were struck by tragedy. Colleagues from both countries have expressed their gratitude to our rescue workers, to NGOs such as our Gift of the Givers Foundation, the SAPS K9 Rescue Unit, Medi Response, Search and Rescue South Africa, to business people, as well as many thousands of ordinary South Africans who held out a helping hand. We must do the same for DRC and Malawi as they have faced devastating floods. It is this spirit of South Africa that has caused us to work to develop a forward-looking agenda and program for the new financial year that we're in. We will, of course, focus on BRICS, and we'll focus on peace and security worldwide, particularly through our membership of the AU Peace and Security Council. We will continue robust bilateral links, as shown in President Ramaphosa hosting Belgium, Namibia, Finland, Uganda, and other heads of state this year. We'll also continue our strong advocacy for implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area as a critical lever for the economic transformation of Africa. We will work with SADC to implement our regional development agenda and continue our support for progress in achieving the goals of our Agenda 2063. With respect to our work in Parliament, I hope we'll finally submit the South African Development Partnership Agency Bill to Parliament, as we must transform the African Renaissance Fund to play a more significant strategic role on our continent and elsewhere. Our agenda and plans require increased resourcing. We are increasingly constrained by our budget, even as our work grows. We have seen this expanded role in the incredible work being done by our State Protocol and Consular Services branch. They render non-financial assistance to our citizens abroad. In the past financial year, Consular Services assisted 118 citizens in distress, assisted with extradition requests, assisted with the repatriation of mortal remains of 193 deceased, and assisted persons in correctional services abroad. They also authenticated over 50,000 legal documents and repatriated our stranded citizens and other nationals from Sudan. No country can exercise international influence through penny pinching. We are BRICS chair this year, and we must showcase our country at its best. We will be G20 chair in 2025, and we intend on hosting a successful G20 and must have the resources to do that. Of course, Chairperson, I'm fully alert to the challenges facing government and confirm DIRCO's commitment to help find ways to grow our economy, to create prosperity and support the achievement of a better Africa and world through our robust international partnerships and global cooperation. I wish to conclude by thanking our deputy ministers for their sterling work, our president for his support for our work, our team DIRCO and particularly DG Dango, our DDGs and all officials in our department. It's a real pleasure to work with the officials of DIRCO. I also wish to thank honorable members of the Portfolio Committee, even the Honorable Chetty, for the work they do in the domain of diplomacy and foreign relations. Because Honorable Chetty, you, Honorable Bergman and Honorable Msani are constant reminders, like that bee that Socrates referred to, that buzzes at your ear and reminds you of what you need to do. And I thank them for the work that they do. Thank you very much, honorable members. I look forward to listening to your views in the debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. The next speaker is the Honorable S.O.R. Mahumapelo.
The presiding chairperson, Comrade Minister Naledi Pando and Deputy Minister Botes and Masego Dlamini, honorable members and South Africans following the debates on various platforms provided by Parliament. As part of our constitutional mandate as the Portfolio Committee to do oversight on the executive, we met, engaged, and in the end, agreed that we must approve the budget of both the department and the African Renaissance Fund. We took note as the Portfolio Committee on the slight increase of the budget to 6.9 billion rand. Having accomplished this collective mandate as the Portfolio Committee, we then agreed to proceed to say to the House that the budget will have to be approved. Honorable members, please be reminded that the struggle to build a better Africa and a better world is pursued under conditions of neither our choice nor making. The international governance systems find itself as a critical juncture where all nations have to carefully interrogate their policies and determine what they aspire to pursue and accomplish for the benefit of their citizens. That is why it is critical. It is critical for all of us not only to understand, but to internalize the objective realities imposed on the rest of humanity by the global geopolitical situations. These geopolitical situations compels the department to adopt non-dogmatic but principled approaches whose objectives are embedded in our perpetual responsibility to prioritize our interests as a nation first. This we do fully cognizant of the objective realities, which among other things include the truth that our interests as a country are fully embedded and intertwined with the interests of other countries of the world. The intertwined character of our interests as South Africa become more expressly embedded when it comes to those countries that were with us in the trenches of struggle for the triumph of the people's revolution over colonialism and apartheid. These are indeed our two true friends. As a committee, we are encouraged by the department's commitment and practice towards the African agenda, anchored among other things on the advancement of the African Continental Free Trade Area and the African Union Agenda 2063. Linked to this, we are pleased that the necessary prioritization of the Southern African Development Community, SADC, for our drive on regional development and integration will continue. Honorable members, we are on the same wavelength with the department on its posture to the effect that South Africa's interest at a global level must remain anchored on our commitment to multilateralism. This is why South Africa should continue to perfect and master the tactical art of engagement through the United Nations and all its ancillary bodies. In the same breath, BRICS Summit planned for August this year will also be used to advance the common cause of the African continent. Our commitment as South Africa to multilateralism shall continue to not only reflect our strategic interests, but also our aspirations and values. Our collective aspirations as a nation are not only limited to economic prosperity. They include the necessary reform of the global order, where certain issues unresolved for many decades stand the chance to be resolved. At the same time, we are fully cognizant of the objective reality that those who chose to enslave, to oppress, to exploit, to maim, to throttle and annihilate us as Africans and Blacks are compelled by the same circumstances imposed on us to have a reciprocative relationship with us, especially on economic realities of the world. That is why, as the African National Congress, we shall never lose patience of explaining the just cause of the struggle of the people of Palestine and Western Sahara. It is our sincere hope that the current leaders of the world shall bequeath to future generations a fully conflict-free world in order for prosperity for all to prevail. We applaud Minister Naledi Pandor and her team for continuing to propagate the call for peaceful settlement of all conflicts based on our objectively principled, non-aligned position of South Africa on all platforms of global governance. Included in this is the NATO-supported conflict between Russia and Ukraine. We commend the department for playing a major role in the resolution of tensions, conflicts, and disagreements in Ethiopia under the auspices of the AU. The successful repatriation from Sudan of South Africans and other nations, as done by the department, is something we fully commend. The presidency has established an interministerial committee to provide a necessary political illumination and a guidance on the correct, and I will read it slow, on the correct legal, moral, and political approach to be followed regarding, among other things, the domestication of the Roman statutes. We stand ready to support the expected progressive outcome because we cannot afford the anti-BRICS, Afrophobic, and Afro-pessimists who determine our destiny and defocus us by wanting to impose the responsibility of arresting President Putin on us. Because we are a people anchored on the rule of law, this important task will be done in line with the Diplomatic Immunities and Privileges Act 37 of 2001 and all other law. As a nation under the leadership, we are unashamedly relentless in our pursuit of a united, democratic, non-racial, non-sexist and a prosperous society. As President Oliver Tambo said, and I quote, "The fight for freedom must go on until it is won. Until our country is free, happy, and peaceful as part of the community of men, we cannot rest," close quote. It is in this context, Honorable Chairperson and honorable members, of what President Tambo said, that the committee will spare no breath in continuing to ask the questions. If our exports, according to South African Revenue Services, are at 192 billion as at March 2023, what percentage of this belongs to the blacks in general and the Africans in particular? If the foreign direct investment, as said by South African Reserve Bank, are at 67 billion rand, as at the fourth quarter of 2022, how much of this belongs to the blacks in general and the Africans in particular? I'm saying this because our struggle has always been for the liberation of blacks in general and Africans in particular. We want to call on all South Africans to ensure that as we debate, as we engage as a nation in all the challenges that we face, we do not forget that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white, but that we have a responsibility, as the preamble of the Constitution of the Republic says, to address the injustices of our past. The struggle continues. Ya lebo.
Thank you very much, Honorable Supra. The Honorable Powell.
House Chairperson, yesterday, the Honourable Minister Pandor openly told the international community that the BRICS nations are now actively working together to challenge the global predominance of values and principles that have been promoted over many decades. What are these values that you seek to challenge, Minister? Freedom, justice, tolerance, democracy. In the same breath, the ANC has justified their failure to condemn Russia's invasion of a sovereign state under the spurious auspices of so-called non-alignment. Honorable members, imagine the international community had refused assistance to this nation under the same auspices during the apartheid regime. You see, the plagues of despotism, genocide, and war are only defeated when democracies work together to preserve a rules-based international order that respects the right to self-determination, the principle of territorial sovereignty, and a rules-based international order. Democracy was not achieved in South Africa through the barrel of a gun. And civil war was averted because countries throughout the world who shared our progressive vision worked with us to defeat nationalism, oppression, and tyranny. The hypocrisy of the ANC in turning their back on these very values and the global solidarity that helped to ensure South Africa's freedom in the first place from the grips of illegitimate rule is truly staggering. That a crumbling former liberation movement, who now enjoys less than 50% of the populist support, is willing to abandon South Africa's commitment to constitutionalism and trade on the fortunes of 60 million people in order to protect an alleged war criminal is a direct indication of how desperate the ruling party has become to shore up patronage with Moscow. Honorable members, the ANC's intellectually dishonest rhetoric about neocolonialism is transparent and it needs to be called out. Cadres like to come up here and talk to us about the global South being underdeveloped because of raw material and mineral resource exploitation by the West. But the facts tell a different story. Last year, 36% of South Africa's exports went to three main Western markets. Machinery and value-added manufactured goods totaled 31% of South Africa's exports to the United States, whereas a much higher percentage of raw materials were exported to BRICS countries. 77% of FDI stock into South Africa in recent years came from the EU, the UK, and the US. China and Russia accounted for a mere 6.2%. Russia currently accounts for as little as 0.3% of South Africa's trade ties. We do not even have a trade agreement with BRICS states, and trade ties with the West worth 400 billion rand are now at risk. Let's also put to bed the myth that somehow the ANC owe a particular debt of gratitude to Russia for assistance provided during the struggle. This is a whitewash of history. The fact is that while Soviet Russia provided assistance to the ANC, so did Soviet Ukraine. In fact, more than 328 Umkhonto-we-Sizwe fighters were trained at Odessa in Soviet Ukraine between 1963 and 1965, including ex-ANC Minister Ronnie Kasrils. Honorable Minister, for many years, the world has watched the direction in which the ANC is taking this nation with increasing disbelief. South Africa now faces the real risk of being expelled from its single most important trade partnership, AGOA, all because the ANC wants to bend to the will of a Kremlin warmonger and protect donations that are being channeled to your party by Russian oligarchs. As the ANC continues to squander any last remaining goodwill from the international community, constitutionalists at the highest levels of government are no longer willing to stand back. Let me tell you, Honorable Minister Pandor, you have got high-ranking officials in your own department who are now willing to move against you in order to do what is good and right for the future of this country. The DA will not stand back.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Msana.
Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Order, honorable members.
Sometimes uGoogle uyahlupha ngoba uyakumisleada. Chairperson, 2023 marks 10 years of unbroken struggle for economic freedom in our lifetime, during which the EFF has been calling for the unity of the African continent from Cape to Cairo, Morocco to Madagascar. It is the EFF and only the EFF chair that has been calling for one African passport, one currency, one military, and one Africa, without the artificial borders that were imposed on us. It's been 10 years in which the EFF has been advocating for the infrastructure of the African continent to be upgraded for the ease of trade amongst African states. Over the past 10 years, Chairperson, the economic freedom fighters have secured seats in the Namibian parliament and has had a successful national conference in Liberia and has also an electoral certificate that warrants us to contest elections in Liberia. 10 years, Chair, of advocating for the unity of African people, and years, it's been years, Chairperson, since the brutal killing of Elvis Nyati and xenophobic attacks on fellow African people due to the social ills by the ruling party, which caused Africans to fight over breadcrumbs while the real economy is heading to the seas. As the EFF, we are not amazed that our call for the unity of Africa is deliberately misrepresented because the ruling party has dismally failed to lead and deal with unemployment, crime, and the increasing of violence. It is on this note, Chairperson, that we request and we call upon all progressive forces of the African continent and international forces to fund the revolution by SMSing EFF donation to 42191. Chairperson, we are gathered here again today to debate the budget for a department that has more than 6 years failed to build
Honorable members.
African Parliament building that was meant to put this country on a world map for hosting the African continent. This department has collapsed the image and pride of South Africa in the eyes of the most important African institution, the African Union and Pan-African Parliament, by failing to deliver a permanent housing and a permanent building for the Pan-African Parliament. It does not matter how much we emphasize on the unity of the African continent, but as a country, we have failed to house Pan-African Parliament. This country has opted to make Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa's associates rich through the monthly rentals of housing the Pan-African Parliament than to place this country in African history books. Chairperson, we have ignored the historical responsibility we have towards the reinvigoration and development of the continent. We have abandoned our leadership role in chanting an authentically Pan-Africanist agenda in the continent, and we are paying the price for that. Had we had a strong Pan-Africanist voice in the continent, the African continent herself would be able to resolve many crises, such as the ongoing war in Sudan, the destabilization of Eritrea, the conflicts in Ethiopia, the ongoing negative role played by France in African countries that are France's former colonies. Just next door, Chair, we failed to condemn a coup instigated by Mnangagwa and his group of thieves whose only interest was to loot Zimbabwe and to develop her. Mnangagwa is now using his country as his personal spaza shop, while millions of Zimbabweans are starving. Chairperson, we must condemn the double speak from the highest political office in this country. Do we continue being members of the International Criminal Court or not? Why did Mr. Ramaphosa announce that we are withdrawing from the ICC only for him to change tact a few days later? What is our position on the intensified imperial aspirations of the United States? At the moment, despite the best efforts of Minister Pandor, South Africa does not have a foreign policy. We move from extreme right to extreme left without ever grounding our pronouncements on solid policy perspective. Therefore, Chairperson, as the EFF, we reject this budget vote.
Thank you very much. The Honorable Sangwa.
Honorable House Chairperson, at the outset, one must really want to take this opportunity to thank all the Foreign Service staff of South Africa who represent and defend this country at times, even in the most difficult of circumstances. And of course, to thank the Minister and her team for what is very rare in this Parliament, which is the ability to respond to questions. Hope that that discipline can be migrated to other ministers. So Minister, thank you very much and your team for that. In another capacity, Minister, I think it would be remiss of me. We do not thank you, Deputy Minister Boetes and the DG Dango for all the assistance you gave in ensuring the appropriate facilitation of President Olusegun Obasanjo on the occasion of him delivering the first annual Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi annual lecture in March. Siyathokoza kakhulu. Chairperson, the ongoing global challenges which are prevalent through the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the Israeli-Palestine conflict, the one China policy conflict, and the conflict in Sudan, and the list is endless. More than anything else requires all of us to be a united force in our collective efforts, in our commitment to peace. We must condemn violence wherever it prevails against human rights. Honorable House Chairperson, I would want to start with the financial matters of the department. DERCO's financial management is also of concern. The DERCO 21-22 annual report says there's over 800 million rands in unauthorized expenditure awaiting authorization with no record of any disciplinary steps. Irregular expenditure is recorded at just over 2 billion rands, while fruitless and wasteful expenditure comes in at over 30 million rands. The report indicates issues around SCM procedures and policies not being followed. We also read that of 3 persons placed on precautionary suspensions for an average of 168 days at a cost of almost 2.7 million rands. This flagrant disregard for the proper stewardship of public funds is unacceptable. The AG agrees in stating that the oversight by the accounting officer regarding financial reporting and compliance monitoring was not effective due to an inadequate review of the financial statements and non-compliance not being prevented. Further, the lack of consequence management in respect of officials that allow or permit non-compliance with laws and regulations to take place results in irregular and fruitless expenditure. So this must take particular priority in the department. But at the same time, the question then becomes, Minister, what is South Africa's positions really on anything? The Honorable Msani raises a critical question. On the issue of the ICC, I think it's important, Minister, to clarify, does South Africa continue being a signatory to the Rome Statute, or are you pulling out? Why these questions are important is because they are the yardstick measure and benchmark upon which this Parliament can hold you accountable. We need to hold you committed to your own commitments. If those commitments change, we must be apprised of them so that we can be in a position to understand the thinking of this government and along the lines of its own strategic objectives on the international stage. Interestingly, Minister, is that South Africa positions itself as an advocate of human rights and peace. Yet it is a missed opportunity not to be honest with our friends. If Russia wants an amicable solution, then the point of departure should be to call out the fact that it is an invasion of Ukraine. It does not take away from you actually arriving at a solution on this matter. So, Minister, really on anything, whilst we have got no doubt of your noble intentions and your patriotism and your commitment to the responsibilities at hand, I think one of the most hardworking ministers that we have actually in this country. But clarity is needed. And at this point, it's lacking. And when it's lacking, it's difficult to know who's who in the zoo and what's what in the zoo. Thank you, House Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. The Honorable Dr. Mulder.
God, the Chief Whip.
Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Minister and Deputy Ministers, honorable colleagues. It's a privilege to participate in this debate on international relations and cooperation. And the Honorable Minister started off by referring to the importance of the date today, 10 May, being 29 years since the inauguration of President Mandela on that day. The two of us were both present at that occasion. And you referred to what Mr. Mandela set out as one of the core values of his policies in those days, or his view, namely justice, equality, and peace. And I will come back to that. I want to focus specifically on Program 2, International Relations, as almost 50% of the budget is spent in international relations, 3.3 billion rand. And in the budget report, it is stated as follows. The department would continue to pursue increased and improved access to South African products and services to foreign markets, which would contribute to the aim of increasing manufacturing and thereby contribute to an export-orientated economy. I think we all agree with that. Secondly, the department intends to become a catalyst and operate as a networking agent for South Africa Incorporated. The missions in particular are poised as key frontline role players to the pursuit of economic diplomacy and its component pillars such as foreign direct investment pledges, as well as contribution towards inbound tourism, etc. The question is, how do we achieve that? How do we get to that to materialize? And I had a look again, and I remember what was said about Mr. Mandela's foreign policy. And it was described by some as follows. It could be seen as idealism, the importance of moral values and universalism. Further to this, he adopted the principle of universality and in foreign policy, to encompass universal liberal ideals and human rights specifically. And that placed South Africa in the unique, respected position to mediate in conflicts around the world. We were respected as a country. And the question is if that is still the case. Now, my concern is, Honorable Minister and Honorable Chairperson, that at the moment, it seems that there is a change in approach in the world in various aspects, but specifically by the US, by the United Kingdom, by Australia and other countries, which one could describe as the West. It seems that they are coming with a different approach, and they want to counter China's involvement, specifically the initiatives by China to build infrastructure in Africa. And the impression that one gets is that they won't see rhetoric and buzzwords such as non-alignment or neutrality, or as you stated today yourself, that those relationships with those countries should not be neglected, that they do not see that as sufficient to necessarily to continue giving us access to their markets and agreements. And I think that is a very important and a very sincere concern that we should have. I listened to your speech very carefully, Honorable Minister, and you played a lot of emphasis on BRICS, obviously, and our involvement in BRICS. You referred to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and you say that we are concerned about that conflict and that you think diplomatic resolution is the case, and I think that is correct. And you also emphasized the role that BRICS could play in the processes going forward, and you said the theme for Africa is, for BRICS is BRICS and Africa. You refer to the other trading partners, US and Europe, and you say they should not be neglected. My concern is, Chairperson, that I don't think that is necessarily enough. To tell them that we don't want them to be neglected, I don't think if they care if we neglect them. Maybe we should be more concerned about that. And if you look at the reality, our exports to the US in 2022 was approximately $10.7 billion US. 38 times more than we export to Russia in that period, where we exported $282.85 million. It's a huge difference. If we continue in that vein, we may run the risk, obviously, that those markets may be becoming more and more difficult for us. And I was concerned that in your speech, you didn't refer to the AGOA situation at all. Maybe the Deputy Minister who was part of the delegation would refer to that. I hope so. That was the delegation by Mr. Cynthia Mufamadi. I think it's relevant. Unless we don't care, if we don't mind that we run in the risk in terms of US and those kind of experts. Well, that's just the reality. The fact of the matter is, Honorable Minister, that it seems that our emphasis is so much on BRICS and everything surrounding that, that we take the rest for granted. And I think that will be a huge mistake. But hopefully the Deputy Minister will speak just now and he will inform us perhaps of what was done in terms of the AGOA agreement. I think it's absolutely essential to think that we can just accept that that will be the case in future.
Thank you very much,
thank you.
Honorable Dr. Meldo. The Honorable KRJ Mishra.
House Chairperson, the ACDP welcomes news of the safe evacuation of all South Africans who were trapped in the war in Sudan. According to the Sudanese army, 2 of the nation's neighbors have been supplying the RSF rebels with weapons, ammunition, and other goods. Also, some groups in Ethiopia are reportedly taking advantage of the conflict by trying to retake parts of their common border. Has the minister and her department verified these reports and what is going to be done to mitigate further attempts to escalate more tension or create another source of conflict? In 2016, the African Union adopted the Lusaka Roadmap to African Peace by 2020. This was a comprehensive plan which provided for proper funding for the African Standby Force, ways to stop rebel forces from accessing guns, money, and other essentials during times of war. Where is that African Standby Force that is now so needed to intervene in the war in Sudan? In 2018, there was an all-time high number of countries in conflict on our continent. The ACDP is convinced that the AU should develop the political will to stop African wars by confronting both destabilizers of peaceful coexistence and known instigators of wars. This department takes great pride in emphasizing the centrality of Africa as the focus of South Africa's foreign policy. It should do more to call for investigations of who instigates and funds warring partners, particularly the rebels in these conflicts on the continent. South Africa's Pan-Africanist vision of unity, solidarity, and a common African destiny of peace, development, and prosperity should be seen to be aggressively leading efforts to hunt down those who are distributing illegal guns on the continent. Yesterday, when the Portfolio Committee on International Relations deliberated on the committee report, concerns were raised about the recommendations that the committee tables before this House, yet they seem to be ignored. Some noted that this committee has been rendered useless as requests for trips to do oversight over the 116 South African missions abroad are mostly turned down. A question was raised on whether the apparent reluctance to allow oversight visits abroad is a way of hiding for the committee that the appalling, deteriorating, and dilapidated state that some governments' properties are in should not be seen. The suspension and ultimate removal.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. The Honorable, the Deputy Minister of International Relations.
Honorable House Chairperson, Honorable Ntombela, Minister Pandu, Minister of Turco, Deputy Minister Mosego Dlamini, the PC Chairperson, Honorable Obakeng Mamupelo, fellow members of Parliament, the DG of Turco, Mr. Dango, South Africa's Foreign Services personnel and diplomats. Honorable House Chairperson, South Africa's foreign policy as an indigenous African identity that is woven into and inspired of South Africa all over the world.
Honorable Deputy Minister. Honorable Tandi Tobias, please mute. Can continue, Honorable Deputy Minister.
Honorable House Chairs, I indicated that our foreign policy has an indigenous African identity that is woven into and inspired by the struggles and aspirations of South Africans. It is therefore imperative to restate what underpins our foreign policy, outlined substantively by Nelson Mandela when he said, and I quote, "The temptation in our situation is to speak in muffled tones about an issue such as solidarity. We can easily be enticed to read that reconciliation and fairness means parity between justice and injustice. And having achieved our own freedom, we can fall into the trap of washing our hands of difficulties that others face. Yet we would be less than human if we do so, unquote. South Africa's first democratically elected president held true to his inaugural oath on 10th May 1994 when he committed South Africans to oppose all that may harm it. Honorable members, what constitutes harm to South Africans and what continues to inspire our steadfast solidarity with the oppressed people in the world is that today we mark 75 years since the 1948 mass displacements of Palestinians known as the Nakba or the Palestine catastrophe by the State of Israel. We marked 61 years of the 1962 Cuban embargo, an economic blockade by the United States of America, and 48 years since the 1975 colonial occupation of the land of the Sahrawi people by the Kingdom of Morocco. The white paper on South Africa's foreign policy entitled Building a Better World, the Diplomacy of Ubuntu contends, honorable members, that South Africa will work in partnership with countries of the South and the North to address its shared challenges of underdevelopment, promoting of global equity and social injustice. In my intervention, I will focus on the work that we are doing in the underdeveloped South and the industrialized North to address these shared challenges of underdevelopment and the promotion of global equity and social justice, with a particular emphasis on economic diplomacy. Honorable members, South Africa has preferential market agreements with the USA, EU, and the UK, which account for, amongst others, to 906 billion of South Africa's exports. A significant portion of exports are value addition, namely the manufacturing of goods and services, and support approximately 1 million jobs. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, honorable members, these account for 38% of foreign pledges in the investment drive and 78% of our FDI stocks. President Ramaphosa, ladies and gentlemen, undertook an official working visit to Washington, D.C. on the 16th of September at the invitation of President Biden, and the bilateral talks focus on a range of critical issues where trade, investment, energy, global peace and security, food security, climate change, and just energy transition, including the reform of the United Nations, were discussed. This visit appreciated the strong bilateral ties between the USA and South Africa, given the fact, ladies and gentlemen, that an estimated 600 US companies are operational in South Africa. As part of the outcomes of the visit, a joint task force on trade and investment are to be established to expand our bilateral ties between the two countries. Honorable members, over the past year, we were able to undertake a number of official visits to countries in Western Europe, including the UK, Spain, Portugal, and we hosted our counterparts from Austria, Spain, Belgium, and Switzerland. Our president also undertook a state visit to the UK on the invitation of King Charles III. He further hosted the majesties of the King and Queen of Belgium, as well as the President of Spain for an official visit. As a result thereof, ladies and gentlemen, members, a joint Belgium-South Africa battery research project are being undertaken at the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR, and the first African-grown mRNA vaccine is being developed in collaboration with Belgium non-state partners. South Africa remains the only African country and only one of 10 countries globally that has a strategic partnership with the European Union and the EU. Honorable House Chair, the Nordic region remain one of South Africa's evergreen partners, and South Africa's president and the Prime Minister of Norway co-chairs the Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator, which facilitates increased collaboration to accelerate the development production, and equitable access to COVID-19 tests, treatments, and vaccines. The President also hosted Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Finland on a state visit. Honorable House Chair, cooperation between South Africa and Central European countries has progressed extensively since 2016, and there were various exchange programs with Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Romania, Poland, and Croatia. And we have also hosted a number of bilateral consultations with our counterparts in Central Europe, including with the Bulgarians, the Czechs, and Polish, and senior officials meetings with Hungary, Romania, Croatia, and Slovenia. Relationship, Honorable House Chair, with the Baltics continued to expand, and bilateral consultations were held with Lithuania and Latvia. Honorable House Chair, as regards to our relationship with Canada, I wish to inform the House that Canada remains an important ally in helping us address our domestic priorities, including our strive to construct a developmental and capable state. We further look forward to the imminent signing of the long-awaited agreement between South Africa and Canada on audiovisual co-production, which will benefit South Africa's creative sector. Honorable House Chair, the Russian Federation remains a strategic bilateral partner of South Africa. The ITEC was convened by the Minister and presided over by senior officials beforehand. The second Russia-Africa Summit is scheduled to convene in St. Petersburg in July 2023. Honorable House Chair, in Latin America and the Caribbean, we have convened a number of political consultations and meetings which were held with Brazil, Cuba, Chile, Ecuador, Guyana, Jamaica, Uruguay, and Venezuela. We remain steadfast, honorable members, in our solidarity with the people of Cuba as they battle effects of decades of sanctions and economic blockade. The Cubans stood with us in our darkest hour and continue to do so today. Honorable members, our solidarity with the Cubans transcends politics. For an example, in the education sector, more than 2,000 South African students have received medical training in Cuba, and the Henry Reeves Medical Brigade stands as an epitome of Ubuntu diplomacy. Honorable House Chair, Oliver Tambo, on the occasion of the Olof Palme Memorial Action in January 1987 in Sweden, reminded us, and I quote, "Each day carries both the burden of its past and the seeds of its future." The developed North, honorable members, therefore carries the burden of its past and equally has a unique opportunity to carry the seeds of our future together with us as Africans, as we jointly address the challenges of unemployment, poverty, and inequality in the developing South. Honorable House Chairperson, I wish to indicate to the Minister of DIRCO, Minister Pandor, that we value her indelible leadership, and we wish to conclude by wishing her and more than 20 million South African mothers a blessed Mother's Day on Sunday, and we will do so by saying Malibongwe.
Thank you very much, Honorable GM. The Honorable Kwankwa is on the virtual platform.
Thank you very much, House Chair. We are of the view that the department should align the economic diplomacy, as the minister indicated earlier, with domestic priorities of our country. This department has an important role in ensuring or maintaining a great balancing act between local realities and global expectations. The need to ensure in our country that there's macroeconomic prudence along rapid economic growth and job creation, two opportunities that are found or that can actually result from the bilateral trade agreements into which we enter with various countries around the world. This department also has an important role in matching the impulses of nationalism with the needs of foreign investors as a way of trying to attract foreign direct investment in our country. However, we are not convinced that in the majority of instances, we marry economic diplomacy with domestic priorities. For an example, One of our major gripes as a political party is how we use the African Renaissance and International Renaissance Fund and the International Cooperation Fund, where we are of the view that more conditions should be attached, especially when we give resources to countries that have conflict as a way of trying to resolve conflict. For instance, South Sudan received about 100 million rands, for example, in the past, when we're trying to resolve conflict there, and even Zimbabwe received funding. But there doesn't seem to be an improvement on the ground in countries where South Africa has supported conflict resolution measures. There also doesn't seem to be clear economic spin-offs for the country insofar as these conflict resolution measures are concerned. The other concern that we have, Minister, is that it's a problem that we are facing as a country, probably because of our history, is that the most powerful countries in the world seem to believe at a time when we should be promoting human rights and peace, seem to believe in the primitive doctrine that might is right. And once they use conflict to resolve their disagreements and issues, they expect South Africa to be continental and global firefighters, to try and fight and extinguish fires that they themselves started. We must not be tired. We are also concerned, obviously, naturally, about the conflict that's taking place between Russia and Ukraine. But it's not the only conflict that is taking place around the world and even continentally. A speaker highlighted what we already know about the conflict in Sudan. We also know that in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, there's conflict going on. There's conflict in Ethiopia. There's conflict in Eritrea. There's conflict in many parts of the continent where people do not actually get to speak about. The only thing we hear about is Ukraine. We want to hear about Ukraine, obviously. We want that conflict to be resolved. But so should challenges that are faced by the African continent. So should we also focus on the lives that are being lost on the continent daily due to conflict. We are
Thank you very much, Honorable Kwangwa. No, thank you very much. The next speaker will be Honorable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you very much. Let me start off by saying some people forget that once upon a time in this beautiful country of ours, you were the majority, undermined, your human rights were violated by the minority. And now when you join the minority, you think you became the same color as them. That's the problem with some of the people. Somebody undermined us the other day, Chairperson, when we said we are a small party and we passed a motion in this house. Well, let me tell you, we did it because we respect human rights. We respect human rights, something you don't know and understand, because all you know and understand the support you get from the West, and it's all about money. When you get funded by the West, you sing like puppets, you sing their songs, and that's what you do. But be that as it may, Chairperson, today is 75 years. 75 years today, when the Israeli government, in their barbaric actions, demolished 418 villages. Let me repeat, 418 villages. And yet we have people coming here and wanting to defend the action of the unlawful, illegal Israeli government. Now, let me go one step further. Not long ago, Kader Adnan, who was on hunger strike for 87 days. What was his crime? They say he was inciting violence. All this man was doing is standing up for his rights, standing up for what he believes in, for his land, his home, where he was born. And you are saying he's violating the rights. Now, Honorable Minister, I want to commend you and your department, and Deputy Minister is correct with the way you are handling this department. Certainly you are. I want to say, there are South Africans that are training in the Israeli military. It's a great risk to this country with dual citizenship. I think you need to deal with that. I think we need to deal with the issue of Palestinians who need strict visas to come here, but not the Israelis. They are a risk, not the Palestinian people. I want to say, as far as the Russians are concerned, it's not Russian President Putin that's the problem. It's the West that's the problem. This war is not about Russia and Ukraine. This war is between United States of America and Russia. That's what it is all about. So I want to say, do whatever this government has to do, but President Putin will come here. He will participate in this BRIC, and nobody is going to touch him, even if it means we must come out of the ICC, so be it, we must do that as well. Because only thing they do is they target the African leaders and nobody else. Why haven't anybody done anything about Bush? Why haven't they done anything about Blair? Why haven't they done anything about the notorious Netanyahu? Why haven't they done anything about it? So we are saying Bush, Blair must all face the might of the law. The National Freedom Party supports your budget vote. Thank you.
So be it. I'm saying so be it. Your time is up. Thank you very much. The next speaker will be the Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Mashego Dlamini.
Honorable Minister, Dr. Pando, and other ministers who are on the platform, Deputy Minister Waters and other deputy ministers on the platform, our chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, Mr. So Mahumapili, honorable members of Parliament, the Director Generals and our officials who are present, ladies and gentlemen. Honorable Chairperson, it is a great honor and privilege to be given this opportunity to present our budget vote speech on this date in the revolution of our country's democracy. It was on this date in May 1994, when our first democratically elected president was inaugurated. This is the day that brought hope for all people or African children and the world at large. Honorable members, this is the most significant day in the history of our country and the world. Therefore, in honoring this important day, I hope to present a speech that will bring hope to the masses of our country. The region of the world which my work as a deputy minister is primarily focused on, those being Asia, Middle East, and Africa, abound with opportunities for our country in terms of trade and investment. Given the need to expedite economic diplomacy to meet our urgent domestic need, we need to capitalize on these opportunities. As the minister's speech has covered the importance of Africa to our foreign policy, I will focus my debate on our relation with Asia and Middle East. The Indian Ocean Rim Association is making a significant stride as a platform for Indian Ocean states. The endeavors of IORA, through its working group, have achieved sustainable contribution to skills enhancement, technology transfer, technological simulation, and industrial simulation. This work is important for unlocking the ocean economy through localization and value chain creation. Brazil has taken over as the new president of IPSA with a promise to invigorate the IPSA formation. The Indian Brazil-South Africa Fund has achieved great strides in uplifting the most vulnerable in some African countries, particularly women and children. The fund has made available over $4 million, which will be rolled out to projects in countries such as Mozambique, Lesotho, Senegal, and Gambia. South Africa's relation with the People's Republic of China is underpinned by the comprehensive strategic partnership and the 10-year strategic program on cooperation 2020-2029. The two countries hold regular high-level political engagement, including on the margin of global multilateral fora, such as G20 and United Nations. This year, we celebrate 25 years since the formal establishment of diplomatic ties in 1998. South Africa and China cooperate in multilateral affairs, defending multilateralism and safeguarding an open and inclusive global trade system. South Africa and China continue to reinforce mutual aspirations of promoting South-South cooperation and development through BRICS and FOCAC. China remains South Africa's largest global trade partner in terms of total value of bilateral trade, with total trade for 2022 topping 614 billion rand, up to from 544 billion rand in 2021. However, a growing trade deficit with China of 154 billion rand remain a concern for South Africa, which must be addressed through more aggressive export of value-added goods from South Africa and by negotiating a greater market access into China for more diverse South African products. South Africa is grateful for the job fair that China hosted in 2022, which provides 1,000 jobs for South African youth, and China's commitment to create an additional 19,000 jobs over the next 3 years. Japan is a substantial investor in the South African economy with invest of over 100 billion, creating around 200,000 local jobs. South Africa co-chaired the South Africa-Japan 13th Partnership Forum in October last year, and the outcome of the discussion is set to advance bilateral relations, as already seen by the visit of a senior government official, including the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs. With regard to the Republic of Korea, the first Joint Cooperation Commission was co-chaired in October 2022, and the successful deliberation will lead to a stronger bilateral relation. South Africa is Korea's largest trading partner in Africa, and Korea is our 4th largest trading partner in Asia. South Africa is grateful for the continued support from the New Zealand in the form of development scholarship, cooperation with New Zealand in the field of agriculture, science and innovation, research, trade and investment, as well as transport is valuable. We look forward to celebrating the 30th anniversary of the establishment of relations between our two countries in 2024. The 8th senior officials meeting with Australia was hosted in South Africa in March. The two countries will celebrate 30 years of diplomatic relation in 2024. South Africa is Australia's largest and most dynamic market in Africa. And in 2022, total trade between our countries stood at approximately 34 billion rand, up from 28.6 billion rand in 2021, with a trade balance in Australia's favor. South Africa has launched a major initiative to become a sectoral dialogue partner with the Association of Southeast Asia Nation, ASEAN. We look forward to improve trade and investment cooperation, as well as building strategic partnership for mutual and regional prosperity. Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Singapore, and the Philippines will all be celebrating 30 years of formal diplomatic relation with South Africa this year. Structured bilateral mechanisms with these countries are instrumental in terms of strengthening trade and investment cooperation. South Africa and India will also be celebrating 30 years of formal diplomatic relations this year. India is currently also one of South Africa's largest trading partner in Asia. South Africa is to host the next Joint Ministerial Commission this year. South Africa participated in investment and trade conferences held by both India and Pakistan. Pakistan hosted the 3rd Pakistan African Trade Conference in November 2022. South Africa commends Pakistan for implementing a new policy termed Engage Africa, which is driven by the Minister of Commerce, Textile Industry, Production and Investment, and supported by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Pakistan. We welcome this initiative by Pakistan to build new partnership for mutual development with the African continent. The Sri Lanka Foreign Minister, Mr. Sabri, led a delegation for Sri Lanka on study tour or study visit to South Africa in March this year to learn from South Africans' truth and reconciliation process. This is a continuation of support South Africa has provided towards national reconciliation and nation building. The Bangladesh Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Mr. Alam, visited South Africa in February this year. he inaugurated the Made in Bangladesh exhibition at the Sheraton Hotel, and we had bilateral meetings. We are deeply appreciative of the humanitarian assistance countries in the Gulf region have provided to our country, notably the flood in KwaZulu-Natal. Countries in the Gulf region have become critical contributors to the implementation of economic reconstruction and recovery plan. Various high-level visits, including the visit by President Ramaphosa to the Kingdom of the Saudi Arabia in October last year, have served as a catalyst to increase investment as well as trade and economic linkages with major economic powers in the region. South Africa has increased its frequency of engagement with countries from the Levant region. It is in the process of expanding our legal framework of closer collaboration with countries like the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, the Syrian Arab Republic, and Lebanon. In response to the humanitarian crisis following the devastating earthquake that hit Syria on the 6th of February this year, South Africa made a contribution of 5 million through the International Committee of the Red Cross earmarked for Syria. South Africa is also exploring other avenues to assist with the medium to the long-term rebuilding.
Deputy Minister.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Honorable Chetty. Honorable Chetty, your mic is off.
Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Minister, members, DIRCO continues to pride itself as a department that's a law unto themselves, yet they continuously serve as a shining example on how to make a mess of a multi-billion rand budget when your internal controls are reliant on factors that you're not in control of. This department is a clear example of the terminology polyficials. In this department, the officials act as if they are the politicians making decisions, while the political bigwigs have to regulate or do damage control due to the officials' errant behavior. I must, however, hasten to add that the officials did make the right call when the department issued a statement criticizing Russia's attack on Ukraine. However, this was short-lived when the minister and President Flip-Flop Ramaphosa issued a statement contradicting the DIRCO's position. Let's not forget the most recent flip-flop between the officials and the political leaders of DIRCO when the department called for the enforcement of the International Criminal Court ruling for Russia's Putin's arrest, were he to come to South Africa for the upcoming BRICS summit. And the political leaders flip-flop stance retracting that statement. And to add further embarrassment, we had the leadership flip-flopping again when it came to our membership of the International Criminal Court. 1 minute we're leaving, the next minute we're not. The on-the-fence middle ground position that we find ourselves in South Africa regarding our position on Russia's invasion of Ukraine is another international embarrassment that the lackluster leadership has bestowed upon South Africa. Even our BRICS counterparts, Brazil, India, and China, have taken a stance voting in favor of the United Nations resolution regarding Putin's escapades in Ukraine, whereas as usual, South Africa chose to abstain. The resolution describes Russia as an aggressor in Ukraine and calls for those responsible for violations to be brought to book under international law. The UN recognizes the International Criminal Court, which has issued an arrest warrant for Russia's Vladimir Putin. Is this indecisiveness the leadership that's causing South Africa embarrassment on the international stage? One can't be faulted for assuming that the minister's continuous accompanying of the president on his overseas junkets has his flip-flop tendencies rubbing off onto her. This department still hasn't learned from the infamous 180 million rand New York pilot project shenanigans, for which no arrest has been made to date or any money is recovered. As the department continues with the current Pan-African Parliament project that costs us currently 3.2 million rand a month in rental. The current long-delayed infamous Pan-African Parliament building has further cost us 90 million rand, and that is excluding the 40 million rand a year rental for Gallagher Estates. Minister, with the current situation, South Africa cannot afford this vanity project anymore. Over ₹500 million rand has already been spent on rentals, and with nothing more than a barren piece of land to show thus far. Minister, we call upon your department to abandon this project and allow those other member countries who are eagerly awaiting to host PrEP in their countries to rescue us from further embarrassment. And please, let's not waffle on about how important and what prestige this brings to our country. For was this important, we would have already had the buildings erected, occupied within the first 3 to 5 years of being granted the host country privilege. And let it be known, it took India, our BRICS partner, 17 months to build a new parliament in Delhi. Sadly, internationally, we are viewed in poor light as a rudderless boat being steered without a captain. Chair, with a more stabilized government and a higher foreign investor confidence in the party leading this country, we could see more stability in spending of these budgets. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chetty. Honorable members, I'm informed that Honorable Mauma Pilu left 3 minutes, which he is donating to Honorable Nkosi. Honorable Nkosi, you have 13 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Chair of the Portfolio Committee, Honorable Minister of DECO, Dr. Pando, Honorable Deputy Ministers Mashego and Waters, honorable members. As I join those who are welcoming the budget today, I would like to commend the department for the great work it has done in representing South Africa on various international platforms and for communicating and asserting our foreign policy diligently and correctly. We have witnessed the department's performance in providing support for South African citizens that face challenges in countries facing violent conflict and in other areas where there are other forms of natural disaster. Recently, we witnessed the successful repatriation of South Africans from Sudan, coming shortly after similar such efforts in Turkey and Syria. This good work must continue, and we continue to encourage South Africans to report their presence to our embassies and missions. This on its own will assess identification of citizens in case of strife. To build on the good work that continues to be done by the department, we need to deliberate and focus in making South Africa an influential partner and equal partner in the global, regional, continental, and particularly in the global south. In order to do this, we must intensify on our side service delivery at home in order to position ourselves positively in the international arena. The current challenges of load shedding must be resolved speedily so that we do not affect trade with specific countries and in the international relations we have with other countries, bearing in mind that the negative effects of load shedding may affect our trade status. We have confidence that the work being done to address this dilemma will soon bear results so that our standing improves internationally and is not compromised. Providing long-term solutions in this regard will contribute to the just energy transition underway in this country and on the continent. South Africa must maintain her robust stance on foreign policy ideals. Our democracy is a product of a long and protracted struggle which included violent conflict, and we must be guardians of our oldest principal document, the Freedom Charter, which declares, I quote, "There shall be peace and comfort," close quote. This will be done by a South Africa that continually exercises its independence in international relations, respecting the sovereignty of all its neighbors and all countries engaged in international relations. There is no intention on our side to impose our will, but we work within and are guided by these international relations, adhering to and supporting and enhancing principles upon which these relations are based. We must encourage and deepen our participation in various BRICS fora, like the Business Council, the Women Business Alliance, Youth Interaction and Exchange, the Think Tank Council and Civil Society Platform, to ensure that the opportunities of this association are explored maximally and shared across society in this country. South Africans must participate in all these forums and travel to other countries to gain exposure and experience on how best we can address the issues we are confronted with. We must encourage the exchange of knowledge and ideas as we grow within this space. Our involvement will also boost tourism and provide our economic growth and development, both as a country individually within the region and in particular in this continent. Most countries, for example, Egypt, have joined the new development bank, while others have expressed an interest to do so. This is an important development, which as a country we embrace and welcome. The bank provides financial support to emerging markets and developing economies for infrastructure and sustainable development. This support will be groundbreaking if all African countries and those that apply in particular are welcomed. And this can increase and boost investment and trade opportunities in the region and the continent. It also comes without onerous conditionalities and direct or indirect structural adjustment measures imposed by funding agencies that has hitherto done so to stifle economic growth and development of countries in the continent. These conditionalities continue to perpetuate poverty and to relegate African countries to the bottom of the ladder of trade in international relations. As we know, BRIC countries agree that the United Nations must remain the center of multilateralism and these fora must be reformed to make them more effective, inclusive, and representative of the global community. This includes reforms of the United Nations Security Council to ensure that African countries and other regions of the global south are properly represented and that their interests are effectively advanced. We must therefore continue to advocate for BRICS to accept more African countries that have shown interest to join this body at the time when we are chairing this important forum. We know that post-1945, when peace was established through multilateral institutions, there has been skirmishes and notable interventions in terms of war and escalation. However, the entire humanity has committed to creating and maintaining peace through both preventative measures and combating it where it happens. The escalation of war since 1945 is not an indication that humanity has turned its back on the creation of peace. South Africa embraces this and regards it as central for the advancement and development of all communities, particularly those of us who are in the South. We know the emanation of this has come from a desire to impose unilaterally your interest, particularly of part of the developed world in other parts of the continents and the world. However, working within BRICS and other fora, we are assured that we have friends, even in those developed countries, that with us commit to the reform of this multilateral institution to ensure inclusivity and representation by all of us. The United Nations was not created at the behest of anybody, but in the interest of all humanity. And therefore, as a country, will act within this and not deviate in any way. We commit ourselves to the founding values of BRICS, which include the need to restructure the global political, economic, and financial relations to be more balanced and representative. This we do not commit to as a figmentation of our thinking, but because we have a commitment to ensure that humanity develops and develops so on an equal basis without any imposing their own self-interest on others. A few weeks ago, we hosted successfully the AFCTA Business Forum here in Cape Town. This was a resounding success. This AFCTA is the world's largest free trade area, bringing together 55 countries of the African Union and 8 regional economies to create the second largest free trade market for the continent. The aim is to enable a free flow of goods and services across the continent and to boost the trading position of Africa in the global market. to accelerate infrastructure development, generate growth, and the attainment of a better life for all the people of this continent. There are great opportunities for us in different industries with different countries within BRICS and on the continent. All opportunities that are unlocked must be made available to the people of the country so that they fully benefit from our partnerships and involvement in these different bodies. We must strengthen our economic diplomacy and promote cooperation between countries and within the African continent. Africa is very rich in mineral resources and wealth, and this must be engaged to improve the quality of life and the attainment of a better life for the people of this continent. Using available treaties, regulations, and agreement, it is time that we say we must assert that we will trade within the continent first and foremost and enhance our global involvement in the international trade. Our president has stated that one of our priorities during our chairpersonship of BRICS is to ensure that we unlock mutually beneficial opportunities to increase trade within this continent, to ensure that there is investment and infrastructure development, and most importantly, to transition justly to new forms of energy provision. The continent is witnessing a number of initiatives that contribute towards this goal. This is the Africa we want, and this is the Africa we will create, and this is the Africa in which South Africa plays an active role without imposing its will, but working jointly with all other countries. In this month, in the month of March, we celebrated International Women's Month, celebrated particularly in New York and the United Nations. Our delegation was represented by the DECO minister, who did so ably to place on the agenda the plight of women in the underdeveloped world and in the developing world. We welcome this as an initiative that continue to place the plight of women on the agenda of development and a sustainable enhancement of economic involvement by all sectors of women, rich or poor. It is important that we correctly ensure that women and youth play a gainful role in redeveloping and redefining the plight of this sector of society. Chairperson, as I conclude, I would like to welcome Honorable Powell to the committee, but to remind her also that in this committee we work quite jointly, and when we differ robustly so. Welcome, Honorable Powell, and remember that the Ukraine that you are today celebrating is a Ukraine that ourselves and many of our predecessors have been trained in, but it was not a Ukraine of NATO. It was a Ukraine of the USSR. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next speaker will be Honorable Nyonto from the virtual platform.
Chair, we are not debating, but we support this budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Honorable Hendricks.
House Chair, Deputy Speaker, our leader, happy Mother's Day, Minister Lady Pandor, and my favorite, the Honorable Chief Whip. It is with great pleasure and humbleness that Al Jamaa supports this budget to show my constituency confidence in Minister Lady Pandor and the Deputy Ministers. Being part of South Africa's political system and a proactive member of Parliament, and co-governing the city of Johannesburg with 8 other political parties, I am more than happy to support DERCO's budget. We as a political party, Al Jamaa, of the opinion that our country has accomplished realistic results by maintaining good and fair relationships with several countries over the past 2 and more decades. We admire the way Durko steered international relations as it encountered choppy industrial relations affairs regionally, continentally, and globally. South Africa is proud of Minister Lady Pandor for stepping in the shoes of Oliver Tambo, as we remember him for establishing solid relations with countries all over the world. Our form opinion is that Durko's drafted a budget for 2022-2023 that was reasonable and judiciously divided considering the abnormal circumstances the world community faced, and we trust that the budget for 2023-2024 will deliver better results. At this juncture, allow me to say that it is indeed difficult for our country in general and Durko in particular to sustain the ties with each and every country, including both rogue states and non-rogue states across the world. It was observed that despite the challenges, internal and other external factors, our country's department has done reasonably well. And here I wish to congratulate Minister of International Relations, Dr. Lady Pandor, and the team for having kept their fingers on the global pulse. We should remind ourselves of industrial relations ties that our country has with certain rogue states, ones that rebelliously ignored human rights laws within their borders. We think of Netanyahu's Zionist Israel, and we think of the occupation of Western Sahara by Morocco. There are other countries under occupation, and our voices seems to be silent. Our country is duty-bound to proactively come to these communities' assistance by showing our eagerness to firmly tackle matters that affect us as a global society, and even provide them with weapons like they did in the harshest days of apartheid to defend themselves, but not to use the weapons to attack.
Thank you.
Let me wave the flag for diplomatic staff in South Africa
Thank you.
who struggle for residency in spite of qualifying and
Honorable Hendricks.
having sons and daughters born in South
Honorable
Africa
Hendricks.
gradually at our universities. These include
Honorable
countries
Hendricks.
like Iran and
Thank you very
Indonesia.
much.
While this is the prerogative of Home Affairs,
Honorable
Durko
Hendricks.
must back for them. Durko must insist
Honorable
that a special
Hendricks.
desk be established at Home Affairs to fast track the application.
Honorable Hendricks.
You cannot wait for 10
Can you
years
switch off
of
that mic,
applying
please?
and qualifying.
Honorable Hendricks. Honorable Hendricks. Honorable Hendricks.
My time is up. I just heard, Honorable Chair. Is that correct?
Honorable Hendricks.
Where is the Minister of Police?
Honorable
Where is the
Hendricks.
Minister of Defense to defend
Honorable
me?
Hendricks.
My time is not up, Honorable
Honorable
Member.
Hendricks.
Your time is up. We will take the Western Cape from you.
Honorable Hendricks.
You will not make the Western Cape the 55th country of Africa.
Honorable Hendricks. Honorable Hendricks.
We trust you in the city of Johannesburg twice.
Honorable Hendricks. Can you leave the chamber?
Introduce spy equipment in the city of
Honorable
Johannesburg.
Hendricks, can you leave the chamber?
Charge you for terrorism. The DI is a terrorist party.
Can the surgeon in arm assist me to take Honorable Hendricks out?
Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Honorable Hendricks. Honorable Hendricks, while you are still there, can you please leave the chamber?
Sorry?
Can you please immediately leave the chamber? There is a point of order.
House Chair, I've noted your ruling to throw Mr. Hendricks out, but I would like you to please, in a full sitting of the House, to make a ruling on his behavior. I don't think people undermining you, saying their time is up, and then continuing to shout profanities on the podium is actually parliamentary. So I'd like you to please make a ruling when the sitting is sitting.
With pleasure, we'll do so. Thank you very much. As I wait for Honorable Hendricks to leave, Deputy Chief Whip, you have a point of order?
Yes, Honorable Chairperson, thank you very much for recognizing me. But by throwing him out of the house now, you have already imposed a penalty. He's not sitting now in the house. You have already thrown him out. That is a penalty on its own.
Thank you very much. We'll look into that properly so that it's legally properly processed. Honorable Faber.
Chairperson, the department's allocated 6.6 billion budget this year has decreased with 1.3%. The currency fluctuation of the rand shows that in April 22, 14.60 rand was worth $1. We are now around 18.40 rand. $14.2 million less in value than last year. The main reason for the decrease of the South African rand is because of poor ANC political and diplomatic decisions taken. While on the other hand, we have a president collecting valuable dollars on his farm in his secret furniture business. South Africa is one of the largest diplomatic corps in the world, with salaries of employees amounting to 2.8 billion rand. Some of this seems to be a complete waste of money, with our embassies headed predominantly by political appointments used by the ANC presidents to reward comrades and not at adding value to South Africa's economy. Government should shrink its footprint, especially where we don't find any economic benefit. We currently have 125 diplomatic missions represented in 108 countries, with a property portfolio of 127 state-owned properties and more than 1,000 rented properties abroad. On the African Renaissance Funds, the African Renaissance Fund was promulgated in 2001. This act provides for the purpose of enhancing international cooperation with and on the African continent, and to confirm the Republic of South Africa's commitment to Africa. Now, in 2012, President Zuma somehow added Cuba to become part of the African continent and bailed them out with a 300 million rand economic assistance package, similar to his fire pool that he also added to his Nkandla home for safety reasons. Then last year, Minister Pandor wanted to donate 50 million to Cuba. We can just be thankful that the courts stopped her in her tracks. So, Minister, now I will be the other irritating bee in your other ear. Minister, the ANC's romantic and emotional connectivity with Cuba is taking food from the tables of many poor South Africans. One wonders if the ANC is using Cuba maybe as a laundromat. It is mind-boggling that the ANC can still be adamant by putting Cuba before South Africans who suffer every day to provide to their families. Coming to BRICS and the National Development Bank, only China, Minister, sustained an extensive growth, while the other BRICS members, Brazil, South African, and Russian, stagnated. As South Africa, we should not be penny-wise and pound foolish. South Africa's total trade with the United States and European Union were over 900 billion rand during the last year, while the trade with Russia was only 15 billion and China coming in at 480 billion.
There is a point of order.
Thank you, Chair. Is the member willing to take?
No, I'm not willing to take your question.
I just want to ask him a question
No, I am
whether.
not taking your question.
Just know that.
Can I ask him?
Permit does allow you
whether
to
he
get
will take
hearing
a
aid.
question? Honorable Faber. Honorable Faber. Honorable Faber.
You've got money for a hearing aid through your policy.
Honorable Faber, don't repeat what was done by Honorable Hendricks. The member rightfully so is standing up to ask me, not you, whether you are willing to take a question. Honorable Faber, are you willing to take a question?
No, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. He is not willing to take a question. Can you proceed?
Chairperson, yes. As I said, Russia was only 15 billion with a business with us. Now, in conclusion, Chairperson, siding with Russia, as well as the debacle on the International Criminal Court we witnessed in the last few weeks and this flip-flopping, South Africa will eventually be alienated from the West, which will destroy our economy, the little bit that is still left. So to save South Africa, we have to remove this ANC government at the voting polls in 2024 and replace them with a competent DA government, as is running in Cape Town. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Honorable members, I have made a ruling by kicking out Honorable Hendricks. However, we will look at whether whatever he said after, there are some profanities, meaning unparliamentary language that he may have used, and then we'll make a ruling at a later stage. Thank you very much. The next speaker is Honorable Muela.
Thank you, House Chair. Angibingelele kusositswebhu omkhulu wenhlangano lebusake South Africa uMemajudina. Ngibingelele uNgqongqoshe welitiko letekubambisana lelibukene nemave angaphandle kubambisana nemave angaphandle sihlalo ubabe uMahumapile. Ngibingelele nabosekela Ngqongqoshe bematiko alelitiko le-DERCO. Bese ngibingelela kanye nawo wonke amalunga lahloniphekile alendlu lesikuyo. Nemalunga aseNingizimu Afrika wonke ngiyawabingelela. The 2023-24 budget vote is tabled under the conditions that the Minister of Finance defines as difficult in the domestic and global economic environment. The crisis between Russia and Ukraine, as well as its effects on commodities markets, supply chain inflation, and financial conditions has exacerbation to the global slump. High global inflation could result to a quick tightening of monetary policy in countries, causing financial strain in some of emerging markets and developing economy. Nevertheless, while navigating this difficult terrain, it is testament through its budget, the Department of International Relations and Cooperation remains committed to its mandate as the custodian of South Africa's foreign policy. As stated in the Goal 7 of our medium-term strategic framework, South Africa is dedicated to using its foreign policy to contribute to a better South Africa, better Africa, and a better world. Our government demonstrated its commitment by implementing a comprehensive strategy framework for combating the pandemic and its consequences, as well as sharing our programs and lessons learned with the entire continent. Chair of the session, the safeguarding of peace and avoidance of conflict are significant priority on both the AU agenda and the Secretary General shared agenda. Member nations of AU have been urged to revise their responses to all types of violence and take meaningful steps towards promoting peace and preventing conflict. In our continent, much work must be done to advance democracy and responsive governance. That is why Honorable Powell, together with Honorable Faber, it is important to note that, and we are going to actually teach you about democracy and how we obtain this democracy in our country, because your forefathers failed you to actually teach you about this democracy, and we are going to lecture you at one point. And we must be able today to tell you that you must make sure that you play far away from arresting President Putin, because your boss here in Western Cape doesn't have any capacity to arrest President Putin. The South African government's effort to deepen ties with African nations, particularly those in our region, must be supported by the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. Conflict-ridden nations should be urged to settle their differences amicably through dialogue, negotiations, and collaborations rather than resorting to a war and bloodshed. We thank President Cyril Matamela Ramaphosa in his capacity as an outgoing chairperson of SADC organ on politics, defense, and security cooperation for his effort in stabilizing the current security situation prevailing in the Eastern DRC. Peace and stability are sacrosanct to the realization of economic development in the SADC region and even beyond. South African government has launched various initiatives to attract investment by business in the economy, including foreign investment. DERCO has played a pivotal role in facilitating foreign investment in the economy. For the last financial year, DERCO has undertook to prioritize economic diplomacy as one of its sub-programs to be carried out by its mission abroad. We also pursue African agenda, our African agenda. We urgently require a coordination mechanism that will facilitate a close partnership between government and business, and will provide leadership to our government, wide effort to promote our economic interests. The economic relations or relationship between South Africa, the SADC region, and the continent will greatly benefit from one more coordinated approach, which will also assist in attracting foreign direct investment and building economies of scale. As we celebrate African Month, as of December 2017, South Africa's total trade with Africa stood at 420 billion in favor of South Africa. We predominantly export raw material, thus affirming the strategic importance of the continent of South Africa's economic development. For South Africa, to secure better life for all, it is important that this trend continued beyond the confines of our continent. To the rest of the world, it is imperative to ensure Africa is not only a market for foreign multinational companies, but equal partners in economic affairs of the world. The 2023 budget is a people's-driven, centered, and it creates an enabling environment for South African business abroad and those who are based domestically who are seeking to penetrate the global market. We are encouraged by the work of the ministry in their mandate to realize South Africa's foreign policy objectives in a difficult global arena, Honorable Minister. We therefore support all effort that seeks to maintain our national sovereignty in pursuing our country's developmental agenda. Honorable Msane, unfortunately, this is not a fundraising session, but it must be noted that it's a plenary assembly. It's a plenary assembly. So we must be able to understand that when you want to fundraise, my Honorable Musane, go and do a fundraising dinner. Honorable Shengwa, what do you want? Ufuna zoo. Puma zoo, Honorable Shengwa, is not your area of territory. Honorable Chairperson, we therefore welcome the budget presented here, and we appreciate all the great work done by the department, that is being done by the department, and also in all our region and foreign missions. Vote ANC 2024. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Honorable members, the next and last speaker will be the Honorable Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, who will have 9 minutes because she left 4 minutes from her original time. The Honorable the Minister.
Honorable members, I wish to begin by thanking all members who participated in this debate. I must say I'm disappointed that we did not congratulate the officials of the department for having achieved an unqualified audit outcome for the first time in many years. And I have said it as it's been left unsaid. I am also extremely concerned that much of our discussion about insecurity and conflict is about Ukraine and Russia and not fellow Africans. We must be concerned about Africans and the threats that they face every day. We must be worried about food insecurity on the African continent. We shouldn't stand up here and pretend we are European. We are not. We are part of Africa, and we must have attention to the condition of Africa. I've just seen a tweet which says that I'm very cheeky and so on, so let me be calm. I wish to begin, Chairperson, by indicating to the Honorable Hlengwa that indeed our country does have a foreign policy. We have a white paper on foreign policy that was adopted in 2011, and we have a national interest paper, which is a policy paper articulating South Africa's foreign policy position, which was adopted by government in 2022. I wish to also add that the practice of foreign policy is never fossilized into one policy instrument, given the fluidity of international affairs, which change from day to day. And you would not be able, as you have with regulations, with respect to procurement or other matters, to say, I'll act this way today, and tomorrow I'll act the same way. Foreign relations doesn't work in that way. I also believe that on values and principles, as raised by the Honorable Powell, we will challenge double standards. This is what I said in the symposium at which I think you were present. We made it clear that our concern is not values and principles or the respect of human rights. It is the practice of double standards that we see used in international matters. If you are Black, you practice genocide. If you are white and powerful, it's regime change. When it's sovereignty for some. When it's territorial integrity for some and not for others. That's what we will challenge. And I think you must challenge that too. So just as much as you're concerned as to what is happening in Ukraine, so must you be concerned about what is happening to Palestinians. Because if you are not, then you are exercising a double standard in that Palestinians don't matter so much, but Ukrainians matter a great deal. We do not accept that approach to foreign policy. And of course, Honorable Msani, I must repeat again, Africa is central to our international relations. Using lovely concepts like Pan-Africanism doesn't detract from our focus, which is Africa at the core. This is why we have an extensive missions footprint throughout the African continent and why Africa is our largest trading partner. This is something many of us don't talk about. We are committed to continuing this focus on our continent and in playing a role in entrenching peace and development in Africa. I wish to explain, the Honorable Kwankwa raised this important point, as well as the Honorable Faber. Honorable Faber, when we say we're providing support through the African Renaissance Fund, we've never handed out cash, never. Not our practice. The aid we give is goods, and the goods are goods purchased from South African companies, not in Cuba or anywhere else. So every support we provide is of South African humanitarian aid purchased in South Africa with South African money. And this is misunderstood by many, many people. We have tried to explain this to you, but of course I know that when you're in the DA, even when the truth is right here, you tend to ignore it. So with the ARF, we are providing critical humanitarian support on the continent and elsewhere. With Cuba, we never said we want to hand out money. We found the judgment quite amazing, hence we are appealing it. With respect to China and growth, we would like to see higher levels of growth because as you would see from the March statistics from SARS on export, China is a significant export partner for South Africa. And so the higher levels of growth, the more success for our businesses. Hence, we do want to see greater growth there. Then I believe it's important that you don't look only, Honorable Chetty, at the fact that South Africa abstained on a number of resolutions on Ukraine. You must look at whether the resolutions sought to achieve the path to diplomacy that we have been proposing and the path to peace, which we have insisted is what we should focus upon. We have never said we condone the use of force by any, never, not one of us in government has ever said that. Our explanation of vote, which is what you must read in the United Nations, is clear and has made our view very, very clear. We also made it clear that we respect territorial integrity and sovereignty of all nations, including Ukraine, and our explanation of vote, which is very long and very clear, is available for you to read. And Honorable Powell will recall that yesterday we made reference to these explanations of vote as well. On the position of peaceful resolution of the war, our view is gaining traction. This notion that we are not, Honorable Mulder, in conversation with our friends in Europe or the United States of America or elsewhere is wrong. We talk to everyone. Everyone speaks to us. So to create this impression that suddenly South Africa has become a pariah is really, really quite misleading to the public of South Africa. The notion that we must pursue diplomacy and negotiation is something much of the world is beginning to talk about. We were first, but now South Africa's view is being embraced by many. The call for peace and not more war is also a statement of solidarity with the people of Ukraine who are being killed every day, caught up in a war that they did not start, and a war which will only end when the most powerful countries in the world decide that peace and not geopolitical contestation through war is a better option for the world. And this is what, as South Africans, we should be promoting consistently. Our officials have engaged with all stakeholders, including Ukrainian civil society. These stakeholders appreciate the role South Africa is playing, and we are building momentum toward a peace process which we believe will lay the basis for development and the promotion and respect for all human rights. South Africa can never reject a process of peace and negotiation, because we were told, speak to those who are oppressing you, negotiate and arrive at a settlement in the interest of all South Africans. Why don't we want to see that happen with respect to Ukraine? Why do we believe war and those who call for war are the best at articulating a perspective? On human rights, let me tell honorable members that we were overwhelmingly voted for onto the UN Human Rights Council by almost all members present in the UN General Assembly. This was because of our track record on promoting all human rights, and that this track record is respected and known by all. We'll continue to engage in the global community to promote all the human rights for all people, not just for some. Being non-aligned and anti-war is a proof of our commitment to human rights, which was much more noble than those who profess to be champions of human rights, but still fuel war and the killing of innocent people. The war of Ukraine is many in the last decade, and most of the wars of the last decade have also been unlawful, but we spoke very little about them.
Thank you.
Let me
very
then
much.
turn to the matter of finally thanking all our honorable members and confirming to them that we remain a member of the Rome Treaty. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, honorable members. That concludes the debate and the business of this mini plenary session. The mini plenary will now rise.